starting from my left, we have Christine Tao, co-founder and CEO at Sounding Board. We have Olga Shapovalova, B2B and Partnerships Director at Headway. We have Pamay, Bassey, Chief Learning and Diversity Officer at Kraft Heinz Company. We have Stephen Bailey, CEO and co-founder at ExecOnline. And we have Jordan Taylor, CEO and co-founder at Medley. And to kick off the discussion, let's talk about how companies in the L&D ecosystem are approaching employee wellness. And maybe just to start that off, we'll start on the company side with Pamay and giving some color on the company's role in approaching employee wellness.
Sure. Thanks so much, and it's good to be here. Hi, everybody. So, when I think about the company's role in kind of this space, I think of two words. One is support, and one is inspire, right? We certainly want to inspire our employees to make good decisions that can maintain their mental health and wellness, both professionally and personally, right? So we're going to make sure we want to inspire them, we want to support them. So when we think about the programs and the initiatives and the events and the access to resources and things that we amplify to say, hey, these are the things you may be able to try, these are the things that we want to provide. It's all around supporting and inspiring. And we look at it from four perspectives. So a multidimensional approach to well-being, social, physical, emotional, and financial well-being. So not just kind of one of those four, all four of them, and making sure that all of our programs, for example, we have speaker series that come in and talk about speakers who are invited to speak about any topic, whether it be leadership, whether it be around our values or our purpose, et cetera. Next month, of course, we're having someone to come in to speak about the importance of rest and renewal, and so making sure that we're spotlighting those things on a regular basis. And the last thing I will say is, we're a purpose-driven company, and our purpose is let's make life delicious. I work for a food company, so of course, hopefully the treats are delicious, but that is a multidimensional purpose, which is always asking people, what makes your life delicious? What are the things you need to have in your life so that you feel okay, that you're working, that you're resting, that, of course we work hard, but how can you rejuvenate? And asking that question of leaders, of employees, of guests, so that people understand the different ways that they can make sure that they are maintaining their mental health and well-being.
Great. And then maybe we'll pivot to the leadership and development side and the training side and the coaching side, different end of the equation, working with companies, working with employees. Maybe for Stephen on the leadership and development side, where do you see the role at ExecOnline in helping leaders develop skills and everything else to improve and approach employee wellness?
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I would say, in addition to being really excited about being on this panel, I'm a little insecure about my sneakers, because usually, on any stage, I have the best sneakers, but Christine has clearly, raised the bar for this session. So, but I will say, Pamay, I think, when you think about at the company level, there's a lot that's being done. But often, if you think about how it gets executed, it's at the leader level in organizations. And what we're finding right now is we're in a moment of just tremendous pace of change. And so the way I describe it is you're having a once-in-a-100-year event every year. And if you think about the unique role of leaders, a lot of it is providing focus and calm and some sense of direction for teams. And so leaders are tremendous leverage points. If leaders feel overwhelmed, then their teams are going to feel overwhelmed. And so a lot of what we focus on at ExecOnline is providing the right combination of programmatic support and coaching to help leaders keep pace in what we call a learning economy. And so for us, the key leadership characteristic is, as a leader, can you learn faster than the pace of change? If you can, then you can unlock competitive advantage for your organization, for your teams, for yourself personally. If you're learning slower than the pace of change, that's when leaders and teams start to feel the unique stress that comes with a high change environment.
That's great. So company view, L&D training view. Let's also talk about the employee themselves and how expectations have changed around company support for wellness, training providers' impact on wellness. So maybe, Jordan, you can give a little color there on just the employee view and how important all of that is from an ecosystem perspective in promoting wellness for employees.
Absolutely. So just for context, with Medley, we really focus on group coaching primarily for emerging leaders in the organization. So people who fit in this sort of middle manager bucket, and we have individuals join typically in the millennial generation mindset. And it's a stark contrast from other generations within companies in terms of what employees and individuals are expecting and what they value, honestly. I think it's become really clear that the old models of one-to-many training serves a valuable purpose, but what people are really excited about and eager to engage in now is ways to build real connections and build relationships. You mentioned, Pamay, sort of the social and emotional pieces of well-being. In a group, you're able to form real new relationships over time. Also, I think Stephen and Christine, both of us, all three of us are working and leverage coaching as a powerful tool as part of a leadership development strategy. Coaching is something that many people have not yet had experience or access with, especially, and what's exciting is that there is more democratization of that access. And so definitely valuing ways to connect, form new relationships, tangible ways to grow, access to high quality coaching, and a sense of where they're going.
Great, that's helpful. Thanks, Jordan. So let's pivot to sort of current events, where we are today, macroeconomic headwinds, rolling global recessions, regional bank crisis, higher interest rates. What impact are you seeing real time from procurement patterns of corporates around employee wellness spend, leadership and development training spend, coaching spend? Are you seeing sort of that pullback? Is it staying consistent? Would be helpful to hear some color from the panelists. Maybe we'll start with Christine to my left, and then we'll go to Olga afterwards.
Sure, and I definitely want to hear Pamay's thoughts on this, right? Because she obviously has priorities trying to manage too. So I'm the founder and CEO at Sounding Board. Like many of my panelists, we focus on bringing technology to the coaching and leadership journey. And I think the challenge that most companies across like learning and HR are seeing now is this dichotomy of, at the same time that we are expecting more out of our existing employee base, right? This idea of like, do more with less. We have to get efficiencies, improve productivity because we have less resources, we can't hire at the same rate. What is often missing is that responsibility often falls to your leaders and your managers to be able to execute those strategies and to be able to engage and motivate their teams in order to do so. And oftentimes, and certainly, my panelists might feel differently, people programs and learning programs, because they aren't a direct path to revenue, are the ones that get impacted. What we hear from CHROs are, I still get to invest, but if I had 20 programs last year, I can do 10. So I've got to figure out which 10 are the ones that I'm going to be able to really double down on, and then what is the ROI around that. So I think the big impact for a lot of vendors out there is, how do you show correlation to impact? Are you really driving behavior change beyond just exposing somebody to a framework or a content or a new skill? Is that actually being applied to their job? And are they improving in that function, skill, or team because of it? And I do think that's why, for a lot of us, we've seen that coaching is an incredible tool to be able to do that, because one, it's personalized to the learner, but two, there's an immediate contextualization of that to that person's journey. But certainly, we all have our responsibility to be able to show that impact back to the organization. So I think for the companies that are seeing lengthening sales cycles or shrinking budgets, it really is going to come down to, how does this impact the KPIs and the metrics that I have as a head of learning or a head of people, so that I can justify this investment.
Yeah, actually, I agree with all that Christine said. There are a lot of events have passed for like the 3 last years. Yeah, like we just stopped recovering from COVID, then full-scale war in Ukraine, and now like recession is starting. But of course, it will impact the business. And now business is just thinking about how to save the jobs, how to save the people in the companies, and what the indicators for business they have, but in the meantime, it doesn't mean that companies didn't spend budgets for wellness program, for different well-being for their employees. They just, I can say, really change the pattern how they spend these budgets. So now they see if the products where they put the money is really have a value for their employees. They need a lot of data how their employees really engage into the product, yeah, and if they see the value, they of course will spend the budget for this or another one product. Also, if we're talking about sales perspective, yeah, I think like it could change the pattern even in sales perspective when we sell the products that we have. So for example, if we could like in 2020 close a deal like 20, 30 days, now it's 60 plus, because, okay, they have the same budget, yeah, but they just truly understand, okay, I will spend money here and don't want to spend money here, just show me the value, show how my employees really will be, will feel better with your product than without. And of course, the buyer person, I think also changed, now it's not only HR or L&D specialists, it's CFO. Yeah, I think the best person whom you need to speak with.
Right. So to read that back, it's taken a bit longer to go through the sales motion. There's more bureaucracy and red tape and people that need to sign off on the purchase decision, and you need to tie the spend back more tangibly with ROI in order to get across those hurdles that are ahead of you.
And we like pilots.
Really?
Let's try something, right? Let's try something with 100 people. Let's try something with 200 people. Let's try something with a small group and then see how it impacts. And of course, we're always getting back. But why don't you just roll it out to the entire organization, or why don't you roll it out to a larger group? So there's always that back and forth when we're trying new things or trying with new vendors to just try it out with a kind of a small group and see how it hits. And that's part of, I think, what's happening with the...
Pamay, one of the trends we've been hearing is that for larger organizations, there would be a bigger move to consolidate vendors, right? And to buy from existing partners. Is that something that's top of mind for you?
I mean, I think it is, but it's not necessarily because of differences in budget. It's just because procurement is always like spaghetti, right? It's like, okay, I find this really great vendor I want to work with. We got to work through this whole procurement process. And I mean, if you are a vendor, you know, sometimes that takes way longer than it needs to. And so finding those who we can work with, we have our MSA, we can work with them without having to go through that process. And I think that's one reason why it makes sense to have. And then there's trust. You build trust with that, you grow with that vendor, et cetera, and you're able to say, okay, these people can deliver certain things, and I trust the team can work with us.
Yeah, I think, I didn't mean to cut you off here. Just to kind of reiterate both your point, Pamay, and then also Christine's point. So we're a sort of leadership development SaaS platform for the enterprise. We offer coaching and programs, so we kind of see it broadly. And I think in the C-suite, there's an interesting tension right now. So on the one hand, you have CEOs in a lot of the rooms that I'm in talking about real talent challenges over time, structurally tight labor markets. Even with the layoffs you see, there are 300,000 fewer workers entering the labor force every year in the US, just given demographic trends. And you've got, at the same time, a very rapid pace of change where the half-life on skills is shorter than ever before. So CEOs and increasingly CFOs know they need to invest. But at the same time, you're in the current economic environment and these budget realities. And so the question is, where do you draw the line for investment? And I think increasingly what we're seeing, and our platform continues to grow quickly, is that if you have a well-structured case for, and I won't even call it ROI, I think sometimes you can get too precise saying, we're going to deliver a 300% return. I'll tell you now, no CFO is going to believe that if you get that precise. But if you say, we've got data that proves that we improve your retention, we improve your productivity, we improve your goal achievement, and here's the methodology that gets us there. And oh, by the way, you can start to combine this with your own internal company data to validate that case even further. Those are the investments that stay above the line. And to your point, Christine, if you can do more on that platform and allow them to consolidate behind that ROI message or that kind of return message, then those are I think where you're starting to see companies win versus lose.
And Pamay, are you seeing any bifurcation or split on your side around where the spend goes between what we might call softer skills, including leadership and development, versus some of the hard technical skills, technology training, et cetera. Is there any preference for one side versus the other? Is the realities that we've talked through consistent across the full learning spectrum?
It really is consistent across the whole, we call them power skills. And then we're having conversations with the chiefs of all the different functions and asking which capabilities are the priority capabilities. You always hear communication skills, negotiation skills, all the things that are really power skills. And I don't use the word soft skills because
I like power
not,
better.
They're not so soft, they're really important. So it's more just being aligned with those who are leading the functions and leading the business to say, what is your strategy? And this is where L&D, like the seat at the table, like having the conversations that business people are having. What's your 1-year strategy? What's your 5-year strategy? What are the priority capabilities you need to develop in order to drive that strategy? And that's how the spend has to align to that. When I joined Kraft Heinz about 5 years ago, we did a lot of work around proactive learning and democratizing access to learning. Everybody can have access to perhaps various catalogs, various opportunities, and that's great because then you kind of unleash and unlock that superpower to say, there's learning is out there. I don't have to create a program. I want to make sure you know you can be a learner. But now I'm looking at our budgets, we're really aligning the programs, the curricula, the courses, to the capabilities that are going to drive strategy. And that's when I have to go back to my chief people officer, to my CEO, and say, we're doing this because it's aligned with your strategy, not just because we're trying to, it's not about learning agility anymore. It's not about proactive learning. We're hoping that culture has been stoked. And then also being asked to report back to say, okay, well, how are we impacting? How are leadership skills being developed? What do our 360 scores look like from year to year? And we'll talk about that a little bit later, how we're measuring to make sure that the programs that are not just, I thought it was a great program, I had a great time, or I had a few aha moments. How is it impacting kind of our various measures?
Yeah, and I think that's a good pivot into the more detailed ROI discussion. And maybe we'll start on the vendor side, so to speak, of power skills, trying to prove the case around efficacy, trying to prove the case around ROI. And maybe we'll start with Jordan. When you're putting together that pitch to bring in front of Pamay, what are the proof points that you're showing to her that this is a good investment, this is the returns you're going to see over X period of time?
Absolutely, and when Stephen mentioned, the idea, the point around retention being absolutely critical, that's really the number one thing that our customers are typically oriented around, and how do we retain and engage these critical populations, whether it's high potential emerging leaders transitioning into management roles, whether that's people from underrepresented groups who they really want to invest in and leverage. But we do think of it as a full circle. It's of course making sure that the impact is very tangible for our company partners, but also making sure that people's growth is evident to them, and making it very clear to them how they've grown over the course of their sort of 4-month coaching experience. And so, we're at the stage now technologically where it's easy to get data. It's hard to make sure that you're getting the right data and making sure that it's reflective of the outcomes and the impact. But we focus first on enabling people to understand their growth, tracking everything from engagement, surveys, all of that, and then closing the loop with data from our company partners around retention, and then most importantly, sort of performance and engagement.
Great, very helpful. Stephen, anything you wanted to add from your side?
Yeah, so what I would add is, we have a framework that's focused on 3 kind of areas of impact. So retention, productivity, goal achievement. That's important because companies go through periods where they're focused on different things. So one of the things we see is that there's often a 6-month lag between what L&D has been tasked with and where the most recent business thinking is in an environment like this one, right? And so you might have been tasked in your last budget cycle on retention, but now the CFO is talking more about productivity, for example, right, or goal achievement. And so we try to provide frameworks that allow L&D leaders to flex at the pace of the business is one thing. And then the second thing I'll say is, one of the big challenges when you present this data, and Pamay, I'd be very interested to hear your view on this, is, you're often either presenting survey data from leaders that CFOs sort of look at and say, I don't know if I believe this, right? What do the leaders know, right, about these surveys, or how can I trust that data? Or you're presenting correlation data that says, look, for this cohort of folks, X% of them that went through this program stayed in the organization, and that's better than what, sort of the control group that didn't. And CFOs look at that data and say, maybe you're taking credit for things that are outside of the program. The best business cases combine both. So when you can say, leaders say that their intent to stay is higher because they've been through this experience. And, oh, by the way, it correlates to and been validated with outcomes. Those are the business cases that we find tend to resonate the most.
And Pamay, has the focus on retention shifted at all, given that we're now in a period where there's been more rifts and employee reduction across the U.S., or is it just same as it's always been, given it's a very distinct part of the employee population that you are strategically important to retain?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're still talking about retention and certainly wanting to make sure that we're minimizing regrettable losses, right? So even though their layoffs are happening, there are certain people in critical roles. You want to make sure you're retaining them. I'm responsible for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So also making sure that the employees from underrepresented population, we're not losing them. And so there's always a conversation around retention. And what's fun, for me anyway, is that learning and development becomes a tool for retention, as you mentioned, when we're talking about whether we're going to fund programs or not. It's not just about the ROI and the particular skill development. It's also around how can we make sure that we are pouring into people and investing in people, and learning and development is a way to do it. Leadership development programs, accelerator programs, all of those things. But retention is absolutely still a very vibrant topic of the day.
And as you think of your ROI checkpoints, anything else that you're focused on in addition to the ones that Steven and Jordan walked through as they're thinking of positioning to you?
And I think you mentioned some of this, our engagement survey data, and we're just making sure that employees feel like they are telling us that they feel like they're being invested in. Our 360-degree data that surveys we do on managers and leaders. So there is a lot of survey data that does come about, and I think that, I've been in L&D for my whole career. It's really difficult to actually say this, to your point, this program is the reason why that thing happened, or like sales went up because of this wonderful sales program, but still looking for opportunities and ways to speak to the business in the way the business speaks to each other around the value of whether it's leadership, mental health, coaching, any of those things.
One of the things that we've seen that's been interesting, because this is a hard question, right? Especially for power skills or leadership development. You don't take a test at the end of a program and say like, hey, I'm 2 times better as a manager than I was before this program. And what we found is, if you think about relationships across an organization, my relationship with my manager, while you do use a traditional tool like surveys, what we actually look at is the alignment between a manager and a leader. So I have a set of capabilities and my own self-assessment around that, and my manager's assessment of my capability. And then how does that change over time? Are we closing the gap between my perception of my skill level or capability and that of my manager? Because if you think just at a very basic level, what causes friction around your development? You might think you're a great, I'm great at prioritizing and communicating with my team. If my manager does not see that and have that same perception, there's a gap that needs to be closed in order for you to be successful within that team. And so a lot of this measurement can also be thought about from a relationship basis and where you're collecting those data points. And then even linking to performance, we have companies that will look at manager effectiveness scores and pre and post of those that have gone through a program, and how have you been able to move people in terms of performance from a management perspective. I don't know if that's interesting. Does it align with how you think about things or have thought about some of
Absolutely,
that?
it's interesting because it's the direct reports that are going to really be able to say whether my manager is improving or not. And we do surveys like 6 months after you take this manager course. Has it changed? Do you have that bump after you take the course and you feel like I'm going to be the best manager in the world because I just had this course, but 6 months later, are you still practicing those manager capabilities? Are you still improving? And so that relationship between the manager and direct report is actually very valuable to see the perception of self and the perception of the direct reports.
Great, really interesting. So let's pivot to consumption patterns. So how are employees actually consuming and engaging with the content, and specifically how's that changed and evolved? So we've gone through this period of COVID where everyone was dislocated from work, working from home. Many are coming back to the office. Many are working hybrid. Curious from a wellness product, and specifically Headway with Olga, how you've seen consumption patterns change over time, and where are we today in that curve and evolution of consumption?
Actually, I just want to add one thing for the previous question. Yeah, I think it's really important to have the diversity for different employees and have different assessment for different types of employees. Yeah. So if you have, if we can compare, for example, platform to the product, to the mono product, yeah, it's better to have a platform because different employees, they like to use the content differently. And if they need, for example, gamification, you need to have it. If some of them wants to read or listen, yeah, so you need to have this diversity just to go, for example, to enterprise company, yeah, and this, I think you can, and have good engagement and have good retention, and you will understand today we have this KPIs, tomorrow we will have another one. That's why you don't need, if you have a platform, you don't need this aha moment just to go and sell to the company. It's the first thing. Regarding the consumption for now, actually, even if I can talk about my environment, every day I listen more and more, I hear more and more about wellness programs, psychologists, coaches, people understand that they need help, yeah, especially if we talk about some stressful situation that we have in the world now. That's why we see this demand. That's why we produce a lot of products. Even if we can see on the conference, yeah, there are a lot of new applications, new products, new platforms that provide different well-being programs. Yeah, it's just because the people really need them. So I can say that people start using it more and more. They start understand. They need to understand the market. They need to understand how it actually could help themselves, how the company can help themselves in the different questions about it. So I think consumption starting more and more higher. Yeah, especially I can divide it for 3 topics. First is lifelong learning, of course, especially with bite-sized content, because actually now, I can't say nobody, yes, but most of the people, they want to sit for, I don't know, 5 hours and just listen something, just one. No, they need something very quickly, very catchy, with gamification, and only after this they can, okay, I understand this topic and I need more and more just to be sure that I understand the topic as the whole topic that they have. The second one is different mindfulness programs. We have a lot of applications now, platforms, yes, so people can go and read and see whatever they need. And the third one is mentoring, one-on-one sessions. It's not only about coaching or psychologists, it's also mentoring inside the company. If we're talking about leaders who can provide different help, who can provide different information for their employees to be sure that they really can help them.
Yeah, and I guess from a trend perspective, is the consumption pattern still just as high as it's always been? Are we at a peak? Has it come down a little bit, in the more recent months? Just curious where we are at this point in time.
I think it depends on the situation that we have. Actually, even in media, yeah, when there are a lot of different news, when we understand that, okay, today something happened, for example, yeah, and people don't understand what they need to do with this, and while they're just in turbulent time, they try to achieve their stressful less, and after this, when they understand what to do with this, yeah, consumption goes down. Yeah, so it's ups and downs, I think, like a roller coaster, yeah, every time.
Okay, got it. Interesting. And then maybe similar question, but on the coaching side, coaching, leadership, and development. Christine, any trends that you're seeing around employee consumption of your product?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing is just that the learning and what employees are looking for needs to benefit them pretty quickly. Meaning, I'm looking for something that will help me now because I have a challenge I'm faced with now. And I think that is one of the areas where coaching, mentoring, our platform supports all kinds of person-to-person development and conversations, that is something that we see rising, not only in one-on-one, but in group, right? Because you're looking for support. You're looking for other ways to be able to connect and get what you need, and to be able to apply that immediately. So what we're seeing is that even traditional forms of learning, curriculum-based training, where almost every company and vendor are thinking about how do you apply some of this coaching, mentoring, additional ways to be able to provide that additional support immediately, because people want to be able to have that be impactful much quicker.
Very helpful. And on the consumption side, what's the KPI that you obsess over the most, just to make sure that people are engaging with the product? If you can capture it in one.
Yeah, I mean, we look at sessions completed, and then we measure what does that do to the capabilities and goals you're trying to achieve. But look, you can't have some shifts in your mindsets and beliefs without having those conversations.
Good. So let's pivot again, and now we're going to pivot to the future, and we're going to talk about longer-term trends. We've kind of leveled off to where we are today. So thinking next 3, 5, 10 years, where do you see leadership development, wellness, coaching space trending? And maybe we'll start with Jordan, then we can get some input from the various panelists.
I mean, I think we're very much still at early innings, to be quite honest, from just our discussions with CHROs, from still staying really close with consumers. Many people have not yet had experience with a coach before, or the types of leadership development resources that have really historically been limited to very senior people within organizations. When I think about 3, 5, 10 years, it's impossible, not even 3 years, but it's impossible in the next 3 months to 1 year to not really think about how AI is going to impact the space and the ecosystem. Our perspective is that people skills and power skills are going to become one of the few ways for people to differentiate themselves. And that it'll be hard to replace the experience of human-to-human connection. I think conferences will still be happening in rooms like this, where you'll bump into someone, you'll talk to them, and that's just not the same as talking to a bot. And so I'm excited about the opportunity that it does present, however, because I think there's going to be a renewed and continued focus, honestly, and expansion in how important power skills are, and how coaching and leadership development can be vehicles and tools for that growth.
Stephen, anything you want to add?
Yeah, so I'd say 2 things. So one, and we have a unique view here because we offer both programmatic support and coaching support on our platform. And one of the things we're seeing is a trend toward breaking down silos between those areas of spend, so that you can more tightly integrate them and create a better experience for the leader. So one of the things as you've democratized coaching is you've gone from coaching that is often working with senior leaders that already have the skills, and then you're just helping them think through a problem, to actually working with individuals that need skill development. And so the more you can combine programmatic and coaching solutions together, the more ROI you unlock. So that's sort of one. The second big trend is obviously, I think, related to generative AI. And I would just sort of say AI more broadly. Everything's kind of getting put into the generative bucket, but there was a lot of exciting things that were happening before ChatGPT released, and there are more to come. But what I'll say is, at the very highest level throughout human history, there's been a view that you cannot scale quality education. It's either quality or it's scale, right? So the one-to-one tutor relationship or coach becomes like kind of the pinnacle of that, of the best education. I think what generative AI will allow us to do, and AI more broadly, is break that scale quality compromise, leverage data to deliver personalized learning at scale that's super high quality, and that's going to have huge implications in the enterprise. It's also going to have implications, I think, for access to education more broadly.
Anyone else like to weigh in on this topic?
I'll say this. Yep. One of the things we're having conversations about right now is what is going to happen in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. And over the past couple of years, what we've realized is that when you're in a situation as a leader where you don't know what's going to happen, you have to become comfortable with that, right? So maybe in the past you could have kind of leaned into the fact that I'm a leader, I have a certain title, and I have this body of information or expertise, and therefore I can tell you or I can manage you in a specific way. But to the point of learning at the speed of change, really trying to help leaders and managers, equip them with that I don't know what's going to happen, but how am I still going to be a problem solver? How am I still going to take the information I have and somehow inspire people to follow whatever the plan is, et cetera? And so a lot of kind of training leaders to be comfortable with change, comfortable with uncertainty, comfortable with all of those different things. And that way, whatever happens, you know, you are still able to lead. And so we're having conversations about how to make sure that we are equipping leaders and managers in that way. And every employee have some sort of ownership of their learning and development, so that they are learning how to learn, so that whatever happens in the future, they are not paralyzed by the fact that, oh, like, things are changing so fast, I can't even learn that. Well, that's just the world we live in now, and it should not be something that is scary. It should be something that you embrace and say, let me just dig in and learn my way through this, because that's how the world is now.
Yeah. And on the AI and generative AI point, important distinction, Pamay, from your seat, how are you approaching it, embracing it? Are there certain parts of it that make sense to adopt sooner versus others? Just curious strategically how you're thinking about that.
Yeah, there are certain parts of the business that have been, to your point, using AI before ChatGPT and for years before. Marketing, for example, doing, you know, marketing campaigns using AI, et cetera. There are other parts of the business. So now what I'm trying to determine is how much of the business needs to know what's going on, because it's very easy to kind of put your head in the sand and be like, well, you know what, I'm over here doing this task. It has nothing to do with AI, and so let me know when it's important to me. So figuring out how to upskill the entire organization on this so that it doesn't pass you by. Also, as an L&D leader, how can we make sure to develop and design, develop, deliver programs in a more effective and efficient way. So if content is being able, we can develop content more quickly or more effectively, then my team needs to know how to do that, how to use that technology to do so. So it's kind of two different buckets I'm thinking about, is upskilling the organization and then upskilling the team so that we can create great learning at scale and more quickly as the organization becomes more agile and demands speed for learning experiences.
Great, very helpful. I have another one I'm going to ask, but we'll ask if anyone else wants to weigh in on the future topic before I.
Well, I have a thought, which is, you know, the power, I think, of a lot of the technologies we've been talking about at this conference is the power to harness lots of data. And I was listening to the talk on generative AI out there, and the CEO of Cornerstone had a really interesting point. He said, you know, there's a sort of thought out there that you know more about your employees before you hire them based on their sort of public credentials and skills than you do after they have literally come into your organizations for 2 years. And it's because so many of these systems of data, your employee survey data, your HR, your performance, your development data, they all sit in these private siloed systems that don't talk to each other once you have an employee in the data. But that context can be so critical in terms of their learning, their development, and their career mobility. And so we can't solve this, but what I would love as a vendor that would love access to this data is, how do the organizations we work with figure out ways to centralize that data? That now your technology can be applied to help us surface that, because ultimately context is what's going to drive personalization of that learner's journey. And I think that's where, you know, technology can really start to take things in the future.
Great, very helpful. So maybe to wrap things up, we have one minute left, just about. Pamay, you mentioned learning at scale, and the final question for the audience to answer, or for the panelists to answer in 5 words or less, is, what is the winning modality for learning at scale?
I'll say I think it's all about integration and measurement. That would be the 2 words I would use.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd say a vibrant learning culture, because I'm never going to be able to churn out programs at the speed at which people need to consume them. And so I can make sure that everybody understands that learning is their own superpower, then they are self-learning machines. And so I think that whether it's technology, whether it's programs, it's whatever vendors we're working with, it's that culture that says, get out there and find what you need to in order to be great in your role and in life. And so we spend a lot of time focused on that.
I think I'll go for diversity and comfortable, because actually if you have different formats, if you have different languages on the platform, yeah, everyone will feel comfortable when they learn, because actually nobody wants to, okay, you need to spend time, you need to spend your effort to learn, yeah, and if you will not feel comfortable, I don't think employees and people actually will do it.
I'd just say, you know, it's back to personalization. So.
Excellent. Okay, well, we'll wrap it up there. We've got 10 seconds left on the clock. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.